Welcome, Soundies, to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 16th of May, 2021. It's good to have you all here. There are mostly questions today, so we don't have any specific topic other than I wanted to kind of share my experience. I finally, with my day job, got an opportunity to do an in-person, kind of a hybrid, I guess I would say, shoot this week. So I went in on Wednesday, got everything set up, did all the gaffing, set the cameras, audio, everything set up. And because I wasn't going to be there operating, what we did is I actually just used the Rode Wireless Go running into one of the cameras. And this is the version 2. It was a 2-person interview. And everything actually went really well. The Rode Wireless Go worked surprisingly well. Again, it was a fairly straightforward shoot. We didn't have, there were the 2 people in the interview there, person that doing the interview and the director. And then I was on a remote call, just kind of listening in, and I was there to do any sort of support with camera or sound things if anything were to go awry. So it actually went really well, and I'm really happy with the results we got. The cameras we did the setup in the afternoon on Wednesday, and then the shoot was on Thursday morning. So the white balance was a little bit cooler, just because of the position of the sun in the sky. And, we lit as well, but just the difference in the time of day made a big difference, a visual difference in terms of the white balance. So I did have to do a little bit more grading in post than I had anticipated, but we were using the Canon C200, and we were shooting, the other 2 cameras were the Panasonic GH5 and GH5S. Those were both shot in 422 10-bit, so it had the latitude to make the corrections without a problem. So all went well there. So then on Thursday afternoon, I went back in to load out, get all the equipment and load back out. And sadly, this is the receiver for the Wireless Go 2. And what happened with the receiver for the Wireless Go 2 is, as I was pulling it out of the shoe mount on the GH5, the clip snapped off. So I thought I was being pretty careful, but what I typically do is I kind of lift up the body and kind of gently try to pull it out. But the GH5 has a really tight shoe, at least when it's working in combination with this. So that did snap. So I put a tweet up on Twitter about that, and Rode responded within like 5 minutes and said, "Hey, we've direct messaged you." And I checked my direct messages, and they said, "We're going to send you a new one." And I'm like, well, that's, and I appreciate that. They do have some good customer service. I don't know if they would do that for everybody. That's a question mark for me. I don't know what that experience is going to be like, but that, when I get people saying, why do you review all this expensive gear? There's an example of why we invest in more expensive gear usually for that type of work. So again, not dissing the Rode Wireless Go 2. It actually did a surprisingly great job on that particular review. Really happy with the audio it produced. It's just the durability is often a challenge with that kind of thing. So, all right, let's go into our, oh yeah, another thing too that happened at home, and when I'm working in just the home studio here doing the YouTube videos or the training videos, one of the things that I bought years ago now, just at the hardware store, was a set of gloves. And I use those whenever I am working, especially with C-stands or light stands or doing any sort of, mostly gaffing type stuff, lighting stuff. And I didn't take those with me when I went to go do the breakdown and the loadout on Thursday afternoon. And I got 2 pretty serious gashes in my finger. You can't really see them here. One on the thumb and one on the finger here. They're going to heal. Everything's going to be fine, of course. But the reason I have those gloves, and the reason I really appreciate using those gloves, is that I get a lot fewer of those. I'm not always walking around with an injured hand. So just something to keep in mind next time you're at the hardware store. If you find yourself in that situation a lot too, where you're injuring your hands. And the reason for that is that a lot of times just all the little sharp ends on those light stands and C-stands. On C-stands, what I get too is on the boom arms, when you tighten those down in the grip heads, especially if they're the black painted ones, it creates little, basically metal splinters. And so when you touch that without using gloves, those can get into your fingers, and those have been really annoying. So that's I don't use any hot lights. I'm working all with LED lights at this point, so I don't need the gloves for heat protection so much, but now I need it for all these other things. So just a little tip, if there's a gaffer in your life that you need a gift idea for, a pair of gloves would be a great one. All right, let's go take a look at our agenda. Actually, our agenda is basically we're just doing question and answer today. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the questions. And I posted this one in the email that I sent out in preparation for the session here today. It's a question from Christopher. He says, I'm currently planning a setup for live streaming and recording board gameplay for 4 participants around a 54-inch square table. Concerning audio, what would you suggest for a reasonable balance between quality and convenience? I'd prefer out-of-frame options if possible. So it's a great question. There's a lot of information we don't have, Christopher, about what you're setting up here. For example, where's the camera? And are you doing just an overhead camera? Or are you also going to have cameras on each of the players? Or are you doing just 4 cameras on the players? You know, we probably need a little more information in terms of framing. But we had a lot of really clever, I think, thoughtful ideas come through. So let's look at our first one, actually, which is a video from our friend Rob.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Curtis. It's me from Jim and Rob over Analyze Movies and one of your regular soundies. I was reading in the notice the other day that you had a question and somebody was looking for a nice mix of quality and convenience for a overhead shot for gamers, all mic'd. And here's my suggestion on what I think is a pretty accessible, inexpensive, decent quality setup. So, and I'm actually using a part of it right now. I'm suggesting that the user invests in a few of these deity lavs. Get 4 of those. Make sure you get the DXLR deity adapter thingummy. And then this will, oh, you can tell I'm using a green screen because you can't see the green tape. Anyway, that will, and I'll show you on my other camera here. All right, so see okay, there's the lav. It kind of snakes behind all my other nonsense. All right, and over to my mixer. Now this is a Behringer, a budget Behringer mixer, X1204 USB, so it's the mixer interface, all that. And what you'll see there is it's going into the green tab. And so that's the audio I'm recording right now. And if you get one of these mixers or even a step down, you don't need that level of mixer even, and that thing cost me $250 Canadian, all in, taxes and everything. So yeah, I'd recommend for the deity lavs. And the only thing is they are a wired lav, so it means you got to get your players to get used to, taking the lav off. You'll have to wire it outside, but I think this gives a half decent sound and it's easy for everyone to use. You don't have to worry about people being on or off mic. It just kind of travels with them. Not a lot to worry about. You will need to, unless you go with something like a the Rodecaster Pro or something, you're going to need to ride the faders, eh? But I think that is that's not a bad solution. So that's my recommendation. Or I can't say it's a recommendation. It's a suggestion for Buddy to mic all his 4 gamers and make it pretty straightforward and pretty inobtrusive. So there you are. I think that's about it. Bye.
Thanks, Rob. That's actually really good advice. I agree. If you want something pretty straightforward, that's probably the best way, or the kind of most straightforward way to, I think, mic all 4 people. Here's some other thoughts here too from Cole, for example. We said that board game setup is a fun one to think through. I'm with you. There are some questions I have before settling on one. Here's some ideas that came to mind as I was thinking about it. They'll likely rig a camera directly above the board game. That's what I would try anyway, so the viewer can get a clear look at the board. Number 1, might be worth suspending lavs from above, out of frame. Even one lav on each side of the table could do a decent job capturing audio. Number 2, I'd do some reading on 360 microphones and try the same technique of suspending them above, or even just an omnidirectional microphone. That's a possibility as well. And again, I agree, suspending from above. And number 3, I wonder if it would work to permanently drill tiny holes in the table and run lavs up through the tabletop. Just don't spill your beer. That's an interesting idea too that I hadn't considered. I would think if you do, you'd probably want to, I would think that the risk with that one would be picking up maybe too much of the gameplay. Don't know what kind of game you're playing exactly, but that, depending on the game, it might pick up a little bit too much of the gameplay. Another thing you could do is put some sort of padded something or other inside of the hole and then the lav through that, so it isolates the movement of the table or the vibrations of the gameplay or whatever a little bit. That one's a little bit more intrusive, but an interesting idea. So thanks for that, Cole. And moving on to Jared. Jared says, it's interesting because some of my future filming endeavors deal with the topic you highlighted in this email, and I'll be interested in learning more about what you and others know about recording a situation like this. I feel like lavs would be the best, but I prefer the sound of booming mics. But with multiple people close to each other, is that even possible without sound bleed or some phase issues? There'll definitely be some microphone bleed with a boom microphone, even with a lavalier microphone. That's relatively close quarters, so although not too bad. I think for lav mics, it's not too bad. I think it would be pretty good. But there is also auto mix, and there are noise gates, so those are things that could help potentially with that situation as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Philip also suggests I would think about experimenting with the following options. First, put on a tablecloth to avoid reflections and harsh dice or any other game noise. That's an interesting idea. Simply use 4 hidden lavs, given that there's enough distance between the players to avoid phasing issues. I think you're right. I think you're probably going to avoid phasing issues to a large extent. There will be a little bit of microphone bleed most likely, but with lavalier microphones, I think you're going to minimize. That's going to be minimized. An omnidirectional or 2 diagonally arranged XY small diaphragm cardioid overhead mics if the framing allows it. That's also, again, good advice there. Preferred option, hire at least 4 soundies to boom the whole spiel. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could do that as well, but most likely I would say that probably the lavaliers makes the most sense to me, or an overhead omni, or an XY, or something like that. All those great ideas as well. All right, so that does it for that one. Before I go on to Jean-Francois's question, just some additional thoughts there. If you are using something like a MixPre, a Rodecaster Pro, a PodTrack P8, the PodTrack P8 has what it calls its noise reduction feature, which is basically an auto mix feature. The Rodecaster Pro has noise gates on it, so you could actually potentially use those to help manage some of the microphone bleed. And then the MixPre has a Mix Assist add-on plugin. If that could help quite a bit as well. That's not going to help. It would help in any of those situations if there are multiple microphones. It would help, I think, especially with the lavs. The Mix Assist, the thing I found with that, and we're going to talk more about it in another question coming up here, is that it works best when you're close miking. So it's probably going to work a little bit better for the lavalier mics, is my guess, based on my experience with it so far. So anyway, back to Jean-Francois's question. He says, I recently streamed a webinar over RTMP with a guest who joined me over Zoom. I used my ATEM Mini Extreme with the Zoom PodTrack P4 I won on one of your podcasts. Thanks again. I could not achieve the right audio signal path to have me and my guest hear the right audio mix and get the right audio out to the stream without adding Voicemeeter Banana software into the mix. I'm trying to be minimalistic in my workflow. Would you recommend a different hardware like the Zoom L8, Rodecaster Pro, or Scarlett 4i4, or still use a software solution like Voicemeeter? Well, I would say if Voicemeeter's working, that's probably the most affordable way to do it of those that you list there. And it also depends. I'm assuming that since you had the guest coming in via Zoom, that you were using some sort of software encoder, so probably OBS or perhaps one of the others that are available out there as well. So I think in that case, yeah, Voicemeeter is basically, or something like it, is going to be what you're going to need to kind of gather all of the audio together, would be my take on that. We needed a little bit more information on which software you're using and things like that. But that would be my take. So I would probably stick with it, Jean-Francois, unless anyone has other suggestions. I don't think that additional hardware, you'd just be replacing the PodTrack P4 with another USB interface, basically, and I don't think that would solve any problems for you. Not directly, at least. You could, yeah, I don't think so. All right. Moving over to Stu. Stu has a question here. Sound devices, have you tested the noise assist for the MixPre 10-2? Let me answer that, and then we'll go through the rest of it here. No, I have not. I have noise assist for the 888, and I contacted Sound Devices. They said that on the MixPre, the algorithm is exactly the same. There's no difference in terms of the performance. The only difference is that you get one instance on the MixPre, whereas you can actually get more than two on the 8 series now, but I have the one that has the 2 instances. So that's the first answer. So I've used it on the 8 series and not on the MixPre, but they are evidently identical. Since it is limited to one channel, I was considering getting 2 downloads and using 2 MixPres, each loaded with the software to record in noisier or hard floor environments when needing 2 mics at once. Is the download effective and worth the money? We are shooting ENG style, so the ability to sound blanket and control our shooting environment is not an option. We are on the move shooting in live environments. Stu, I would say, number one, it works best if you have the microphones close. So if you're using lavalier microphones, it probably would provide some value. If you have a camera top shotgun microphone, I wouldn't bother. I don't think it's going to help a whole lot in that situation. If you're booming a mic, then yeah, it could probably help. I think it's important too to keep in mind that I have found that generally in most real world situations, 3, maybe 4 dB of attenuation is about what you can reasonably expect. Beyond that, I feel like my experience has been that it generally starts introducing artifacts in a lot of real world situations once you get beyond that. So yeah, helpful tool. And is it the end all be all? Absolutely not. But it is a potentially helpful tool. So I would look at it that way. Is it worth it? I would not buy 2 licenses at the same time. Buy one, test it out, and see what you think. We do have a review of the Noise Assist on the 888 on my channel. If you want to go check that out and get some real-world examples of what it sounds like. All right, next up from Stu. The new DaVinci Resolve 17 download, I cannot get the Fairlight noise reduction effect to work properly. It takes the audio clip and just makes it weirdly harsh and buzzing right out of the gate, and there is no adjusting to fix it. It is a strange anomaly that rebooting the program does not fix it. Have you noticed this? No. But let me tell you why I haven't noticed it. First of all, I don't typically use it, and we'll talk about that in your next question here. Not that it's horrible, but it looks like maybe there's a bug here. I have put DaVinci Resolve 17 in timeout for the time being. It has been pretty frustrating for me on a number of fronts. Great for color grading, pretty good for editing. Fairlight has been pretty touch and go. And when I was working on the mix for a short film, it was like, even on 17, it was crashing every 20 to 30 minutes. And so I took a step back and said, look, it's clearly not ready for this kind of use at this point. So I have put it on hold. I would get that as if you're experiencing that, probably other people are as well. So I would put in a bug, submit a bug and have them get to work on that. Or perhaps it's a technical issue. So you could also, actually, this is not the beta version anymore. So I've had a pretty good experience with Blackmagic design support. So you might contact them and see what they can do for you, what they suggest. All right. And then finally from Stu, you recommended Isotope as the VST for DaVinci Resolve Fairlight. There are a few different packages at different price points. Also, you already mentioned that certain parts only work in Pro Tools. I really need noise suppression software that works for hiss, rumbles, low frequency noise, reverb suppression, and general dialogue balance and improvement. Do not need it for music or music applications. What package do I need to buy to accomplish this without overbuying? Well, let's go take a look here at the iZotope site. First of all of RX works in Resolve, in Fairlight. I mean, what I do is I basically round trip over to the RX audio editor, but you can also use the plugins will show up as regular VSTs within the Fairlight interface as well. So it's the what is it called? There's a separate tool. I think it's called Dialogue Balance or something. We'll come back to that in just a minute. Let me look it up. But let's talk about the version that you need. So if we go over here to the computer, I'm on the iZotope website, and this shows the different versions. So there's Elements, Standard, and Advanced. If you want the de-reverb, you need to move up to the standard version. So you should be able to get away with the standard version. It has all of the denoising that you need. What's interesting is that actually RX really was, to a large extent, a tool for video and film, and then they started adding music things to it. So don't worry about the music stuff. You don't have to use it. It's there, but you don't have to use it. Like there's a music rebalance and things like that. You don't have to use it. So anyway, so it looks like standard version is probably the version that's going to be most relevant to you. Now, what is that other product called? Let me go back. I'm just looking on the RX website here. Let's see. Good grief. Their website has gotten a little bit more. Okay, so this is the RX website. I don't want the RX website or page. Okay, music production, Neutron, Ozone, Nectar 3, Insight. See all products. There's one that only works in Pro Tools that is a dialogue match, I believe is what it's called. Yes, okay, so let me show you this here. So dialogue match essentially takes some of the tools from RX and then adds some additional things. This is the only one that works in Pro Tools. Don't worry about this as a separate thing from RX. It's kind of their next level thing, and it does some additional things, but for you, iZotope RX Standard should get the job done. Okay. I think we beat that to death. Maybe not to death, but I think we covered everything, Stu. Good questions, and thank you so much for submitting those. All right, next over to Philip, who has a couple questions here. I realized that if I disengage the left-right recording on my MixPre 6.2 and only record, say, channel 1 and 3 as ISOs, the two tracks show up as one stereo file in both Logic Pro 10 and DaVinci Resolve, which doesn't seem right to me. macOS handles them as a single stereo file as well. Once I record more than 2 tracks, everything makes sense again and I get 3 individual mono files. Am I missing a setting in the recorder, or is this a bug in the writing process of the polywave file? Side note, I'm running firmware version 7.13. Well, Philip, I don't think you mean actual mono files. I think you mean they're individual channels within a polywave file, if I'm reading between the lines there. Yeah, so here's the thing is that digital audio workstations have no way of knowing the format really coming over to them. So if it sees a WAV file with 2 channels in it, it just assumes that it's stereo. There's no sort of, as far as I'm aware, any definition in the WAV format that the recorded WAV format can tell the application that's opening it what its format is in terms of this is actually a dual mono, or this is a 2-channel polywave file. It doesn't have the ability to do that. So that just means you have to tell it in post in your digital audio workstation what you want it to do with those 2 different channels. That's really all it comes down to. So it's not, there's no magic to it. You just, because you have that flexibility, you have to tell the digital audio workstation what to do with those channels and where to put them. So for example, in Resolve, you have to do your channel mapping, and it's called different things in different DAWs, but that's the main idea. So you're not doing anything wrong. There's nothing broken. It's just a limitation of the file format and what you're working on. Next up from Philip, I'm thinking about upgrading my audio bag with a harness and or possibly getting a new bag for the aforementioned MixPre 6.2 overall. Right now I have the reasonably priced Zoom F4 F8 audio bag, which in terms of space is actually quite okay, but lacks rigidity and isn't quite as ergonomic as I'd like. I was wondering if the Orca OR30 would be overkill or if the OR28 makes more sense. Possibly the 280 might be an option too. I'm also not sure if Orca's OR400 light harness is a smart choice or if I should rather aim for the OR40. Any thoughts on the topic from you and the community as well, or are well appreciated as always. Okay, well, let's take a look at audio bags first. So first up, actually, before we do that, let me show you, here's what I have on hand. So this is not a Mix Pre 6. I don't have a Mix Pre 6 here. I have a Mix Pre 10. This is the OR30, and that's a Mix Pre 10 in the OR30. So I think that the OR30 is probably overkill for what you're trying to do, unless you like a bag with a little bit more room in it. So that's the OR30 for reference. Okay. Now, with that in mind, let's go take a look at the ones listed here online. So here's the OR28. This was originally designed for the F8 and even the Zaxcom Max, Tascam DR70, other similarly sized recorder mixers. And so that probably makes sense. I don't understand the pricing here. I guess there's a little bit of difference between these. And then there's also the OR280, excuse me, which was made specifically for the Mix Pre 10. So I have never used or seen either of the. I've seen them maybe at a distance, but I've never actually looked up close at these two to see the difference between these two. Then there's, of course, also the OR27, which is, again, I don't understand the distinction between all of these here. One recommendation you might, Philip, you're in Europe. I'm trying to think of where, I think Noise Boys, you might consider calling Noise Boys and having them see if they could describe the differences between these to you. I don't know if Orca's website, if they have any sort of like, let's see, Orca, here they are. If they have like a comparison chart or not. That's something that just occurred to me right now. Let's see what they have here. Bag Finder. Oh, I don't want a video online right now. So we're looking at, well, oh, here we go. Audio, sound devices, Mix Pre 6. Okay, this makes a little bit more sense. So here's the OR270, not one that I was familiar with. And they recommend either the 270 or the 28. Looks like the 28 is a little bit thicker. This one's super low profile, really thin. So if you have wireless receivers, you're not going to really have a lot of room for those in the 270, but the 28 should have a bit more room there. Then they have harnesses. So we'll talk back about the harnesses in just a minute here. Okay, and then here's the 400 that you were talking about. Okay, so there's some input for you there potentially. OR28 is going to be a little thicker and have room probably for wireless receivers, whereas the 270 won't. They evidently don't recommend the 28 for the Mix Pre 6, so there's some things to consider there. Now, as far as harnesses are concerned, this is the one I have. I use the OR40. It doesn't have any sort of spinal support. It does have shoulder straps and a belt. And then the OR400 has no belt. It's just straps. And then there's also the Orca 3S, which is the same thing as the OR40, except it has this sort of spinal support as well. It's like a hard spinal support. I've actually considered this for the longer days, but I haven't been doing a lot of longer days lately, so I haven't invested in that. They also have just a belt if you want to do that as well. Here's my suggestion. It depends on how long the shoots are that you're going to be doing. I would probably stay away from the OR400. I just find that unless you have a super lightweight bag, for longer days, I think you're going to want something like this. Having the belt makes a big difference in terms of distributing the weight a little bit more effectively. And these are also, I think, thicker pads, both on the shoulders and on the belt, than you would get here on the OR400. So I would probably opt for paying the additional $100 and some for the OR40. This has been super comfortable. I've never, I felt tired at the end of an 11 or 12 hour day, but I never felt like my back was going to give out as a result of that. In this case, I would just think your shoulders would get really tight and really fatigued using something like that over a long day. So some thoughts there for you, Philip. And of course, anyone in the chat, if you have experience with any of those products and have suggestions for Philip, would love to hear those as well. All right, that is everything we have that was pre-submitted. So let's go out to our chat and see what we've got over there. Emma's going to take a look here for us. I'm going to take a sip of water while we're here. Oh, we have a good one already. All right, Techno Channel 33, yes.
Cheesecake.
It's cheesecake. Sorry. Thank you. That's Emma's cackling over there at me. Hey, I actually have a really important question. Tomorrow I'm on set on a big production only as a work experience thing. Any tips on what I should do or bring other than headphones?
Be a sponge. But seriously, as somebody who has done these experience gigs,
Be a sponge. Yeah. I would say, I think Ted said in the chat early on as we were getting started, take notepads and pens and write. I think that's a good idea. Definitely write some things down. Even if I find the interesting thing about notes is even if you take notes and you never refer back to them, it has a way of sort of solidifying the concept in my mind a little bit better. So I would agree with Ted on that for sure. Take notes. Stay out of the way. Bring your own chair. Just a little folding chair or something. Ask, whoever is there on set that's sort of managing your learning experience, ask them where you'd like, you don't want to get in the way. Just, where would you like me to sit? Where can I put up my chair? Don't expect that they will have chairs for you. Has been my experience on set. Don't expect that they'll have anything for you. In fact, unless they've said ahead of time, what they are providing. Whoever the supervising person is on set that you're working with, I would, offer your help, but just then sit back and stay out of the way and let them come to you if they would like you to get involved. I assume it's mostly going to be observation, though. So those are some of my thoughts. I think that's mainly it. Good question. Shoji, hello, I've got another non-audio question. Do you think the Aperture 60D can be used as a key light in a 3-point lighting setup? For a talking head, yeah, I think it probably can be. If it's like a head and shoulders shot, yeah, I think no problem. If you've got the light situated 15 feet away, that's a different story altogether. I'm not sure how much that light's going to make it to the the talent at that point if you are doing a talking head shot. But certainly if it's just a talking head and you can move it within a couple of meters at most, should be fine.
That's
all right.
The wrong one. Sorry.
Okay. Next here from Senoga Moses. Any recommendation for professional audio interfaces for MacBook via Thunderbolt 3 for use in live streaming as an audio input? Well, Thunderbolt 3, I'm assuming you'd be okay with USB as well, with a USB-C connector. Motu M2 is definitely worth a look at if you want to stay on the budget end. They're less than $200. We did a review of one of those probably 3 weeks ago. Really great little audio interface. So that would be one that I would consider. If you truly are looking for Thunderbolt 3 and you have a fair bit larger chunk of change to spend, then the Universal Audio Apollos are really great. I love them. They do really great emulations of a lot of vintage gear as well. So you've got those effects built in and they're processing in real time. So that would be really good for live streaming. Those are probably, what else do we have? Those are probably the ones that I would look at. It gave you a couple different ends of the spectrum there to look at, but those are some of the thoughts I have. And again, we have a great Soundy community here, so anyone out in the Soundy community there, if you've got other recommendations, definitely let our friend know here. Okay. All right, next up from Sergio. Are there health hazards associated with using rock wool mineral wool? Using rock wool mineral wool or Owens Corning 703 rigid fiberglass for DIY sound absorbing panels? If so, what solution would you recommend? I'm not a doctor, so I can't say for sure, but my sense is that you definitely don't want to be breathing that stuff in any of the fibers that end up in the air around that. So I would be careful about that. I ended up, what you see behind me here, I ended up going with some panels that were actually built for me by a company called GIK Acoustics. They do not use rock wool. It's a similar. It's not exactly the same material, but the nice thing about it is also this particular material that they use is formaldehyde free, which was important to me. I just didn't want even more formaldehyde in the room because we live in a world where there's so much of that in so many products. So that was important to me as well. So that's what I ended up doing. I don't know about 703 and rock wool. I just know that with rock wool, I think the recommendation is certainly when it's being installed that the people are supposed to wear masks. So that says something. Maybe that's just when you're cutting it. I don't know. But in any case, it needs to be covered at the very least. And I would cover it on both sides. But again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't really know the health implications or how risky that is and so on and so forth. But that's what I did on my side. Thanks, Sergio. Jack, if applicable, what are your personal remedies for tinnitus or ear fatigue? Well, first of all, 8 hours of sleep every night is one thing you need to consider. Tinnitus, I do experience tinnitus from time to time. I actually have a set of hearing aids that I sometimes put in. I haven't done that very much lately though. That I actually sometimes put in when I get tinnitus, and that helps manage that for me, strangely. Also, you have to give your ears a rest. You can't expect to do 12-hour mixing sessions. You need to step away at points. And if you're working on set, my experience has been that when it's lunchtime, I do what I need to do and take the headphones off, put the bag down, and actually go and relax for a little bit and get some food, and give your ears a rest. So those are some things there. I have... some people have found that playing soft music can sometimes help, or, some other soft sound that's not too outrageous can help. So those are some things to consider as well. Actually, I have a little bit of tinnitus in this ear right now, speaking of which. But those are some things that I typically do to kind of protect my ears and keep things managed. Also, if you are going to be in a situation where there will be potential for very loud sound, I definitely take ear protection of some sort. So I have some, even if it's just the foam ones, those are better than nothing, but there are some better ones as well. You can get custom ear protection, but you can also get, what are the ones called that we have? Heroes. Heroes are available on Amazon or in lots of other places as well. And they're spelled Hearo, Heroes. And so those can be useful as well. So just to, again, protect your ears along the way. All right. Thanks, Jack. Camille, thank you so much for the super chat, for all the info and entertainment. And thank you for adding to that. Kevin, the basic filmmaker. Welcome, Kevin. It's good to have you here. Hey, Curtis, Emma, and everyone. I'm playing the Better Late Than Never card today. Nicely played, Kevin. Good to have you here. Thank you. Mark says, I have a job to record dialogue in a moving minibus. I'm planning on using 2 G4 lavs into an F8N. Do you have any tips? Anything specific to that situation? Not particularly. I don't know if the minivan will be moving, or minibus will be moving while you're recording. If so, that can be a real challenge in terms of keeping a good signal as you move in and out of different areas, and potentially the RF landscape changes. So the number one suggestion I would have is you need to be monitoring the whole time, and you need to do a retake if anything drops out, because that's a definite possibility in that kind of scenario if it's moving. If it's not moving, it's not going to be as risky, but nevertheless, I would still definitely monitor. Be listening so that if anything does cut out or you do run into problems, you at least know right on the spot, and then the director or whomever can make the choice, okay, let's do a retake, or let's give you some time to solve the problem and then do a retake. So that's my biggest suggestion there. Thanks, Mark, and good luck. All right. Fachuri, 1808, I don't know if I said that right. What time code boxes would you recommend out of Ultrasync, Denicky, Ambient Recording, and Tentacle? Or would you recommend a different one? I think a lot of people are using Betsos now. You might take a look at the Betsos. They also do a wireless system that basically rejams itself constantly. So I would definitely look at the Betsos. They all work. I like the tentacles. I have the tentacles. They're pretty good. You can rejam them wirelessly from a mobile app. I don't think a lot of production sound mixers on the big productions are using tentacles, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. I've used Ultrasync. Those are pretty nice as well. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that company now that Atomos has bought them. I hope they keep the products going and kind of evolving. I haven't seen anything new out of them recently except for the Atom X sync module, which goes on the Ninja 5. But it would be nice to see them keep moving forward. I haven't used any Denicky stuff firsthand. They've been around for a long time in the timecode world. And ambient recording, I like the ambient recording too. The Nanos, I have some of the Nanos. I have to confess, I prefer the Tentacles because they're a little easier. The thing about the Nanos is they're probably good if you use them all the time and you've memorized what the 3 different buttons do. But if you're like me and you go at least a couple months between using your timecode gear and you have to remember again, oh yeah, how does this thing work? And what do these buttons do? It's a little bit more challenging, so that's why I generally like the Tentacles a little better. The Nanos are super well built. They're super solid metal, really well built timecode boxes, but I just find them a little bit more difficult to use because I have a longer period of time between uses on those. So those are some thoughts on different timecode gear, but definitely I would take a look at the Betso, B-E-T-S-O, is Michael Wynn, when he came on a few months ago, actually talked about his, and he really, really likes them. Look like they have a nice feature set. All right, Know Your Yoga. My mother has a cooking channel. As of now, I'm using Rode Lav with a long cable running into the Zoom H5. Would it be better to upgrade to the Wireless Go 2? Well, it's a trade-off. From my perspective, it's a trade-off because you are giving up that long wire that is a potential tripping hazard and a little bit of an annoyance. So that's the positive side. That the potential risk with a wireless, of course, is that you could run into dropouts and things of that nature. So it's just a little bit of a trade-off. I don't know what your budget is, but Wireless Go 2 has been pretty good. In close quarters like that, I think it would be fine. I don't think you're going to run into any sort of connectivity issues on a regular basis, most likely, unless you have something funny going on as far as a lot of Wi-Fi activity or a lot of other 2.4 gigahertz activity in that space. But I think it's worth a step up. You did, I don't know if you were here for that earlier part of today's show. Be careful with the Wireless Go 2. I mounted the receiver in a camera shoe mount on a Panasonic GH5 and the clip broke off just this week. So be really careful when you're taking it in and out of the shoe mount. Otherwise, it's a great system. We got really good audio. We were happy with it. So there's some thoughts there. Hopefully that's helpful. And happy cooking and yoga. Share vlogs. Would you ever try daily vlogging on YouTube? No, I wouldn't personally. I don't have time. I mean, it's fun and it's an art form and I appreciate that art form, but it's probably not something that I plan to ever really do a lot of. It's just not, I find myself in the shoes of an educator more often than a vlogger. It can be a good way to educate too, but vlogging is to me a little bit more about just the fun of experience and a little bit less about kind of more efficient delivery of education. Like I said, I'm not dissing vlogging. I like vlogging. I like watching vlogs of certain people. It's more about the personality of the person too, I think. But for me, I'm probably going to stick more with like this live stream format for this channel, and then my more produced videos, video on demand type content, edited ahead of time, uploaded on the main channel. Just because, again, focus on education. So, Kevin, 1, those panels behind you, could those office carpeted panels work well too? I don't know exactly which. I've seen places where they have carpeted walls before, and yeah, that's going to help with reverberation to some extent. These are designed specifically for being able to capture not only the high frequencies and kind of reduce and absorb some of the high frequencies, but also to reduce and absorb some of the lower frequencies as well. You know, again, super low, it's not going to be a panel like this is not going to help with that. The corner traps that are a lot thicker will help a little bit more with that. But again, the reality is everything that can absorb sound will help some. These are designed specifically to capture a wider frequency spectrum of sound than you would get with just a blanket or carpeting on a wall or anything like that. Number two, you say you built those panels. Do you have a video on that? I actually did not build these panels. I actually bought them. So I worked with a company called GIK Acoustics, and what I did is I did measurements in my room. I actually used Room EQ Wizard and a measurement microphone. And actually Behringer makes it's like a $60 measurement microphone. Oh, whoa. Hey, it's floating around in here. This is the ECM 8000. Fairly affordable. You know, is it an Earthworks? No, it's not an Earthworks, but it'll get the job done. And I use that to take some measurements in the room using Room EQ Wizard, which is a free download. I sent that to them. I sent them a bunch of pictures of the room. I sent them the dimensions of the room and where my plans in terms of where I was planning to put my mixing desk and my monitors. And from there, they came back. They sent that to an acoustician that they have on staff. The acoustician worked through that and came back with a recommendation in terms of which panels I should buy. And then I bought the panels. And so we have bass traps in the corners here, and here. In fact, let me turn the camera a little bit. So you're going to see behind the scenes, a little bit messy. But we do have, I don't know if you can see the purple, that's a purple bass trap. So it's a lot thicker than the others. And that's what we have in 3 of the corners. Get the camera back to where it needs to go. We also have some clouds. We have 2 additional panels up on the ceilings here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other panels on the walls. So that's what we came back with in terms of that design. The panels behind me, like this one right here, is a little bit thicker. You can't really necessarily tell from the angle that you're seeing it here, but I think it's a 6-inch deep panel. And they also put underneath the fabric, again, you can't see this, but what they were afraid of is that they didn't want to reduce all of the high frequency sound in the room or absorb all of it, because the biggest challenge when you're working in a room like this is managing the bass, really. And so they put a material underneath the fabric that actually reflects a little bit of the high frequency sound in that panel and the other one, which is just out of frame right over here. And the purpose of that in the overall design was, again, that's one of the tricks I think people get into with using the foam panels that you just buy off of Amazon, is that you end up absorbing most of the high frequency content, but then you have all these weird bass things still going on. So you just kind of make things really imbalanced that way. So that's why I worked with them, is I wanted the input of someone who had a little bit more experience with that. And I wanted the fact that these are formaldehyde free. And frankly, I didn't really have time to build my own. So that was kind of the background for the story on how I ended up here. So thanks, Kevin. Good questions. All right, next up from Sanoga on the Zoom H8. Is there a way of incorporating time code in the recorded audio file since H8 has no time code input? Well, what you can do is you can feed time code into one of the audio inputs and record it as, just like another microphone input. And then in post, you can use an application that will convert it to what I call metadata time code. It will actually take the signal on that audio input and convert and read it as time code, and then stamp the file instead. Take that audio clip out of there, that channel out of there, that was the recorded time code, and stamp the time code within the metadata of the audio file. And then basically any video editing app can read that as time code. So that's probably the most straightforward way to do that. As far as apps to do that, that's part of the reason I'm kind of biased toward the Tentacle Sync system, is that it comes, if you're on a Mac at least, it actually has a Windows app too that's a little less capable, but the Mac version of the Tentacle Sync Studio is really good at reading that audio timecode that you recorded into a microphone input, converting it to metadata, and actually syncing everything up and creating an XML file you can then send to your video editing app with everything already synced up and ready to go. So that's how it works on the Mac side. On the PC or the Windows side, they do have an app, but it's very simple. All it does is it converts the audio that you recorded, the audio timecode that you recorded, converts that into metadata. Then you have to take everything into your video editing app and do the sync there. So that's the difference on the two platforms. But yes, with the Zoom H8, you can certainly do that. Just one of your mic inputs. You just have one less mic input because you're using it for timecode instead. Shoji, what are you currently looking at adding to your audio kit, software and hardware? I'm glad you asked. I actually have on order with Gotham Sound right now. I ended up going to Gotham Sound because they had everything I needed all in one. I bought stuff from True Audio a bunch of times as well. I love working with both of them. They're great. But from Gotham Sound, I have for my sound card, I have a riser or a mast for a shark fin antenna. Actually, I went with what's the name of the company? RF Venue makes a kind of a combined antenna that is a shark fin and a dipole in one. And so that's going to be kind of that's the next thing that I've added to my kit. And that's going to allow me to work a little bit farther from set, if I need to move back a little bit, especially now as we're starting to open up productions again. But we still need to retain a little bit more distance now with the new protocols. So that was the thing that I purchased there. So the shark fin dipole antenna was about $500, and I think the riser was $100 and something, and then the cabling. You had to get custom cabling. So I'll run that down into my Sound Devices SL2, which is the slot receiver for the 4 channels of wireless that I have. That'll bring the diversity antennas in there. So I have diversity from the standpoint that I'm using. It's a shark fin and a dipole that's kind of perpendicular to the shark fin. So it basically provides you 2 antennas, and then the slot will actually use those as the diversity. So if one's not working, it'll switch immediately over to the other one and back and forth and so on and so forth. So pretty excited about that, and to be able to stay a little bit farther back from set when I need to. So that's what's coming up. Ken, do you have a recommendation for a cheap smart slate? No, I haven't used any smart slates, to be honest. We just use dumb slates, which Emma's laughing, but that's actually a term.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So just an old manual slate is what I use. The smart slates are awfully expensive, although I think there are some apps as well. In fact, Tentacle has an app. I have used that a couple of times, and it can sync with if you're using Tentacle's timecode boxes, it'll sync with those. So you can use that. But yeah, other than that, I don't have any experience with them. Sorry about that, Ken. But perhaps Alan? I saw Alan was here earlier. Alan, do you have any experience with, or anyone else have experience with any smart slates? We'd love to hear about your experience with those as well. Kevin, one more question. Best advice, tips on getting the MixPre 3 and the Deity Micro Pro lapels to sound awesome. Pre-post might be too big of a question for this stream. Well, yes. So there are some things. What I find is interesting is that lavaliers can sound dramatically different depending on where you place them on the talent. And it's totally down to, the person's particular voice, and, that particular voicing on that particular microphone. So if you have time, and this is the trick, if you're laving yourself for the most part, then you can probably spend the time to fine tune this for your particular voice and that particular microphone, but move it around and do different recordings in different spots. Sometimes moving the lavalier microphone off to the side a little bit, if you're getting sort of a muffled, lot of low frequency, woofy kind of sound without a lot of high frequency, moving it off to the side will make sure that the microphone is outside of the sound shadow that's underneath the chin, and it will help it sound a lot more articulate and much clearer. So that's one thing. If it's sounding kind of thin and kind of a lot of harshness, moving it to the center of the chest. And also, I see a lot of people clipping them up here at the neck. That doesn't sound good on a lot of voices. Getting it down a little bit lower towards the chest. A lot of microphones are kind of voiced for being in this area down here and not for being right up next to the throat. So take that into consideration as well. If you want more resonance and bass and kind of richness, move down into the, the chest area right at the sternum here, basically, is kind of where I would start. And then if it's sounding kind of woofy and too bassy, I move it off to the side a little bit more. So those are the main things I would look at for production. In post, do not be afraid to use EQ and get used to doing it. I actually was surprised. So on the thing I shot earlier this week, one of the talent was laved with a Voice Technologies VT500, and theirs came out sounding fantastic. It was just a great fit for their voice. They just put it right here at the sternum. Didn't really have to do much to that microphone at all. The other talent was using a Sanken COS 11D. Again, clipped right here at the sternum. And it just sounded, surprisingly to me, sounded kind of, there wasn't a lot of articulation. And I ended up having to go into EQ and actually boost some of the high frequencies quite a bit. Like there was actually somewhere around 3 kilohertz. I had to boost by probably 6 to 9 dB to really kind of get it to open up and sound much better. So I do have a video on my main channel on how to EQ dialogue, and I would use that technique and just practice. And if you're mostly just doing it on your own voice, you will very quickly find what your voice and that microphone need, and you'll be able to just use a preset pretty much every time to kind of dial it in. If you're working with new voices each time, then you're going to have to work and, do a lot of sweeping to find the frequencies that need to be cut and or boosted. So those are some of my thoughts on that. Oh, thanks, Kevin, for the super chat. Appreciate that. That's for the Emma Fund. That's good, because Emma is getting ready to move back into a separate apartment and go back to university in person in the fall here. So that's pretty exciting around our home. All right. How are we on time? We have a few more minutes here. Somebody. Name please a good linear or in-ear system for boom op to talk with him and let him listen to himself without using Slate or hard I/O scheme, like an intercom for SD. I don't have anything set up like that because I'm always doing my own booming, so I haven't walked down that path, to be honest. I did add a pair of in-ear monitors recently. I'm using these Westones. Do you remember the model number on this one, Emma?
Nope.
I don't either. I'd have to look it up. They were not cheap. These are like $400, $500 in-ear monitors. They sound pretty decent. I'm not a huge fan of in-ear monitors. I just never find them all that comfortable for long term. Like if I have to have something in my ears for a long period of time, I much prefer over-ear monitors or headphones. In-ears, though, I bought these specifically because I do some live streams. For example, I did one a couple of weeks ago with Photo Joseph, Aaron Parecki, and John. What's John's last name? From Here to Record. Anyway, we did a live stream. We've got another one coming up this coming week with Epiphan. So I like to have the in-ears for those because they're less bulky. I don't have these massive headphones on. And so that's what I bought them for. In terms of comms, I haven't worked in that situation. I'm really just a corporate video shooter where I do the sound myself. So I'm booming and mixing on my own. So if anyone in the chat has something like that, also go back. If you look at the sound for video session, type in Michael Wynne, Wynne. He's talked about some of those as well. I've asked him specifically about comm systems and how he has his setup. And then also he has another video on his channel where he talks specifically about the comm system he used to use. I think he's updated a little bit since then, but at least it'll give you an idea of what he did in the past. And I think Alan Williams over at Sound Speeds has some where he talks a little bit about comms as well. So hopefully that'll get you something you can work with. Camille, have you solved the problem with the encoders for your Blackmagic 2 ME? No, I just haven't had the time to do it. So I think my suspicion is that it's so I use a Tascam. It's the H.265 version, so the 4K version that can do H.265. That product is actually manufactured by a company called Videon, Videon. I suspect that same company also manufactures at least some of the components for maybe they do, maybe they don't, for the Epiphan as well, Epiphan Pearl Nano. And I noticed that Epiphan Pearl Nano does the same thing. It does this sort of log expansion thing when it shouldn't be doing log expansion. Or color space expansion. I'm not sure what it is entirely, but it's doing something funny along those lines. And I think I noticed that in the Epiphan Pearl Nano as well. So again, I need to get probably on the phone with Tascam if they have a phone. I don't know, or at least via email, and engage their tech support and start working through that issue. But I haven't done it yet, so we'll see what comes of it. I will definitely let you know.
Last one.
Actually, before we go off that one, sorry, Emma. I actually have been super happy with the A10 Mini Extreme. We've actually been using that for the last month or so, and it's been really good. It was a worthwhile investment. And then I have some regrets about the 2ME. The 2ME I think is it's a very capable switcher, but it's awfully expensive for what you're getting. It's capable of doing 4K, which the A10 Minis are not, but anyway, it's a long story, but that's where we're at right now. Okay, last one, Emma. Matthew, would you say that after a few years of their release, the Mix Pre series are still the best audio recorders for under $1,000? That's hard to say. I think one could argue that the Zoom F8N, which I think is right around $1,000 now as well, is also quite good. But the Mix Pre's are really. The Mix Pre's are my preference. Let's put it that way. I don't know that they're the best. It really depends on your situation, how you like to work, what you're trying to do. I would say I like the Mix Pre 3 and the Mix Pre 6 more than I like the Zoom F6 personally. But again, there are lots of people that like their Zoom F6s, and that's fine. That's great. It's a pretty capable recorder. So I don't have a super strong opinion on that, I guess. I would say from my point of view, my preference is for the Mix Pre. Okay. Cool. I think that's going to do it for us for today. Am I right? Are we good? Okay. Well, everybody, thanks so much for coming to our live stream. I hope you're hanging in there. It looks like things are, with the people in India, my heart goes out to them. Stay well, stay healthy, and get out there when you can and where it's appropriate and where you're safe to make some good sound. And we'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.
so hard.